1985. The hair was big, the music was electronic, and Bill Elliott's race car was as fast as anybody's had ever been. It's hard to believe that 40 years have passed since the Winston Million. Awesome Bill from Dawsonville and $1 Million Bill first entered the NASCAR lexicon. It was the first year the $1 Million bonus was offered by series sponsor R.J. Reynolds for winning 3 of NASCAR's 4 marquee events: the Daytona 500, the Winston 500 at Talladega, the World 600 at Charlotte, and the Southern 500 at Darlington. Not since 1969, when LeeRoy Yarbrough won at Daytona, Charlotte, and Darlington, had anyone accomplished the feat. So in theory, it seemed like a pretty safe bet. R.J. Reynolds could bask in the publicity of the offer without actually having to write anybody a check. And along came the Huckleberry Finn lookalike from down Dawsonville way. The Elliott clan, George and Mildred, and their boys Ernie, Dan, and Bill, first showed up on the Winston Cup circuit in 1976. Theirs was a meager existence at best.
The shop we had there at Dawsonville, we would burn. We'd go out and cut wood, and we'd burn. We had a wood stove, so we used. And we did everything we could. And I didn't have any equipment. It was just a tough time. We struggled in a lot of different ways. We'd go rent a hotel room and sleep about 10 people in it. We'd take the mattress off the box springs. We did everything we could do. But we had no money. And back then, we were trying to get $400 and $500 just to go to help out to go to a race.
According to Dan, the plan was for him to one day take over his father's Ford dealership. It was not to be.
Basically, the race team, for the most part, bled it dry. There just wasn't anything left, because when Melling bought in 82, Daddy had already, when Daddy passed away in 98, I went up there and where he had moved to out on Burnt Stand Road at the junkyard, Daddy had sold the Ford dealership already, but I went up there and cleaned out I wanted to get all the paperwork, because Daddy was bad to, you think it's bad in here, Daddy was pretty bad to scatter things around too, but usually everything was written down. You just had to kind of look for it. And I went and got all the bags of papers that were up there, and out of that was all the canceled checks from probably sometime 77 through probably 82 up to 83. And I got to figuring up the checks, the canceled checks in 81, which was the last full year Daddy owned the race team. And when I got to $500,000, I quit counting.
There were flashes of brilliance, highlighted by a runner-up finish to David Pearson in the 1979 Southern 500. Michigan businessman Harry Melling came on board as a sponsor in 1981, and then Melling purchased the team the following season in 1982. There were other second-place finishes: Charlotte, the Firecracker 400 at Daytona, and Charlotte again in 1982. 4 more second-place finishes would follow in 1983 before Bill was finally able to make it to Victory Lane in the season finale on the road course in Riverside, California. After that, things began happening fast. The team landed sponsorship from Coors, and in 1984 won 3 more races, at Michigan in June and then in the fall at both Charlotte and Rockingham. There had been a time in the not-so-distant past when Bill Elliott could go about his business at the racetrack in relative obscurity, but with success came increased attention from the fans and the media. Was Bill Elliott ready for that?
Absolutely not. I was more comfortable under the race car, not in front of the camera.
You don't say.
I struggle with that a lot. And you look through, and that's what I tell people today, that, you don't understand until you get put in this position. I mean, in high school, I couldn't get up in front of a group of 3 or 4 people and say 2 words.
Holy cow.
I was the shyest person probably in the classroom. And to come from that and be able to be put in the position you were put into in 1985 was like light years.
Bill and certainly Ernie were reserved and quiet, but Dan, maybe not so much.
Best time of my life. Yeah. I compare it to, it was like living a fairy tale.
What had been a trickle of notoriety in years past became a tidal wave in 1985. Million Racing took the first step in the Winston Million Odyssey with a win in the Daytona 500. And if that victory came in convincing fashion, the NASCAR community hadn't seen anything yet. Lap 48 at Talladega, Bill was forced into the pits with a loose oil line. What happened next is the most incredible come-from-behind story in NASCAR history. Elliott made up nearly 2 full laps under green flag conditions and went on to win the second leg of the $1 Million Challenge. When it comes to that day in Talladega, it's Dan who asks the question of all questions.
2 laps at Talladega. You tell me how on God's green earth you made up 2 laps at Talladega. And all of that under green.
All of it under green.
There was a caution, what, about 10 laps from the end?
Yeah.
Okay, so you look at that day, because that day we'd pretty much, as long as you can plan all you want to plan, but fate's going to come in and play its card. Okay, so you'd pretty much plan that day that you were going to go over there, you were going to run as good as it took and no more. And what happens? You got to run your guts out.
Yeah.
And I remember one thing, Bill came on the radio and said to Ernie, how long will this thing last? Talking about the car, the speed, and how long will it last? Don't know. We'll find out.
According to Bill, it was Ernie's great engine that meant the difference that day in the heart of Alabama.
You normally feel like the race pace is going to slow down. Well, at Daytona, Talladega, it normally don't, because you get in a draft and you turn more RPMs. So most of the guys were putting gears where their engines would turn more RPMs rather than less RPM. So we're sitting there we're in the garage and I'm kind of listening to these guys and, we're doing this and that and we gear our car higher. And so we're turning less RPM. So it's easier on the motor. It's not as taxing on the motor. Well, the race starts out and it unfolds and, we're kind of rolling along there. And, the race pace picks up pretty good. Well, heck, most of them guys blow their motors up. I mean, you look at the attrition, especially Daytona, Talladega back in that era. It was pretty bad. And then most of the guys is they're out of engine because they're turning more RPMs than what their motor will let them. So they'll get to a point and they'll nose over and they'll make less power when they get to a point. And even if they live through the race. So we're sitting there and we're kind of figuring all this. And I mean, it was just, and we had a good slick race car, and it was, Ernie at the point in time, I think is the most underrated motor guy on the planet.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I've said that 1,000 times. I mean, he's not the most politically correct guy, but I'm telling you what, I watched him work weeks hand grinding cylinder heads back in that day. And he made good power, good reliable power, and shoot, that was 90% the key of our success.
The 1985 edition of the Million Racing Ford Thunderbird has been a subject of intense speculation over the years. It drove reporters like Steve Wade crazy when Bill would shrug and say it was just the right combination of a number of factors. Dan doesn't exactly spill the cores, so to speak, but he does give us a little more than the right combination.
But you get obsessed in one area and overlook another one. But the body stayed the same, and you were able to finesse the cowl openings, the A-pillars, not necessarily as much as the C-pillar, but maybe the deck lid and the spoiler, the things that really arrow that the car responded well to. And you were working on the engine all the time.
3 weeks and one race, won, of course, by Bill at Dover, separated Talladega and Charlotte. The PR machine was in full swing.
Charlotte at that time, Humpy and everybody just hyped stuff so much. You know, and you had people calling you that didn't have a clue what racing was all about.
Yeah.
You know, there again, I'll tell you one more story about Dale Inman. Dale told me one time that he was talking to some reporter, and they'd asked him where he was going this weekend. Now, we're going down Talladega, and I heard this, and I don't know if it's 100% true or not, but it supposedly it was. It said, Dale told the guy, he said, well, we're going down Talladega, and he said, well, where's that at? And he said, when you find out where that is and what's going on, he said, you call me back. So, yeah. But my point is, you had people covering racing that had no idea what racing was all about.
Right.
So it became a...
So you're talking about the New York Times and Sports Illustrated. Yeah.
Everybody that was anybody was showing up. And I mean, by the time we got to Charlotte, it was like a circus.
Charlotte, however, did not go well.
By the end of the weekend, it became a tough deal. I mean, it became
At Charlotte.
Okay. It became... But once we got through Charlotte and the stuff happened, you know, we still qualified good. We ran good. We just had a lug nut got caught in the brake caliper and broke the brake line. And we had to change it, you know, so we lost whatever time, you know, numerous laps getting that fixed, and, you know, kind of put us out of contention for the million.
That left only Darlington and the Southern 500 to break the bank. The pressure was ratcheted up that much more.
The biggest pleasure for me was when I sat down in a race car and put the window net up, put my helmet on. I mean, that was my time. I got away from everybody and everything, and that was where I was at peace. So, you know, you look at kind of what it drew you into, and it just helps you more and more get in a race car, because the thing you love to do, you know, you had to put up with a lot of stuff outside of that, but you were starting to be able to put things in perspective. And, you know, it's like, I'll give you one example. As 85 went through there, it's like, you know, used to, you'd walk through downtown Dawsonville. I mean, there wasn't that many people there anyway, but you'd say, you know, you'd meet somebody and say, hey, how you doing? You know, and go from there. And then by the time 85 rolled along, it's like somebody walk up to me and I'd look at them and say, what do you want? Because they want something. You know, instead of being the person you were, it changed you into something, the person you really wasn't.
Come race weekend at Darlington, 2 South Carolina state troopers held onlookers at bay.
They were 2 really nice guys. And they did, you know, they just kind of was, you know, because what I said, you know, the way I laid it out was just like I said earlier. You know, there was a time for the media, time to work on a race car, time to race, and we set it up where we had everything set up and time to ask the questions, and let me focus on what I need to focus on and go from there. So, you know, we had everything pretty much arranged and I think it went well. I mean, regardless of what happened during the race, I think the weekend went well. You know, even, like I said, regardless of what happened, if we won a race or not, I think we had everything where we needed to be.
Darrell Waltrip had himself a field day at Darlington, telling reporters, look at Bill over there. All he needs is a bunch of gold chains and he could have him an entourage. What if it had been me who was put off by himself and given a couple of guards? If I ain't already the most hated guy in NASCAR, I would be after that. Everybody would think old Waltrip has gotten too big for his britches. It wasn't the first time Darrell had tried to get under Bill's skin. Of course, Bill knew of DW's antics, but tried to pay it no mind.
Just Darrell. I mean, he didn't really bother me that much. I mean, he said a lot of stuff, but I mean, it's just like, heck with him. You know, he just tried to get under your skin, and it just didn't bother me.
Bill sat on the pole at Darlington with a speed of 156.641 miles an hour. But once the race got underway, he was not the strongest car on the racetrack. Dale Earnhardt led a total of 147 laps, but fell victim to a blown engine and spin in the second turn late in the race. Bill missed getting collected in the mishap by this much. Harry Gant was strong as well that day, leading a total of 84 laps, but he too blew an engine. Cale Yarbrough took his turn at the front and was busy holding Bill off when he had power steering issues. Bill led the final 44 laps, beat Cale to the finish line by 0.6 of a second, and collected the biggest payday the sport had ever seen.
The coolest thing and what I remember the most is the fans never left. They never left the grandstand. That was the craziest thing I've ever seen. I mean, it was like, wow, what I just witnessed. You know, it took a long time for that to sink in. And I know I had the Coors distributor there, Chris Giannis. He's since passed away. A heck of a nice guy. Got to be really good, close friends with him. He took us to dinner that night. And then when we flew back home Sunday, there was all the people at the shop. I mean, it was crazy. It was just crazy how they followed that stuff. And just, I mean, thousands of fans showed up at the shop. It was unbelievable.
Following his historic win in the Southern 500, Bill Elliott led Darrell Waltrip by 206 points for the Winston Cup championship. It appeared at that point that Melling Racing was going to have its Coors and drink it too. It didn't happen. The next 4 races were disastrous. Bill wound up 12th at Richmond, 20th at Dover, where he had won in the spring, 17th at Martinsville, and 30th after early transmission problems at North Wilkesboro. By the time the NASCAR circus rolled out of Wilkes County that day, Elliott trailed Waltrip by 30 points. Although Bill put together a string of 3 top 5 finishes in the next 3 races, culminating with a win at Atlanta, he would not regain the lost ground.
A lot of things was our lack of racing, knowledge. I mean, we had some stuff break that shouldn't have broke. Like we had some bolts break, several of the short track races that took us out of contention. And that was just our fault, our racing knowledge fault. And I think we focused so hard on the Winston Million because like I said, our biggest deal was, I feel like our strong points and our biggest deals, we focused on the speedway stuff. And then the short track stuff just kind of got pushed off to the side, and we tried to just nurse it along the best we could. In 85, there was only 11 or 12 of us at the shop. That's motor shop and chassis shop.
It wasn't just the driver who felt the tension intensify. The entire team felt as if they had the weight of the world on their shoulders as they barreled toward a date with history.
We wanted to win but we wanted to win everything. The only thing that I think the only thing that we lost focus on in 85 was the fact that we could physically burn out. We were the reason that we didn't win the championship because I feel we burned out.
Where did that burn out, if that's what you want?
Started showing up before middle of the year.
In what respect? How did it manifest?
Preparation of the car.
Wow.
Okay. So you're a small team, you're a small nucleus anyway, and you're trying to keep all this stuff in house. You're trying to keep as much stuff as you can from other teams, from other people. You're doing the best you can. You're trying to do everything yourself. Okay, because you and I both know that there are people within the organizations that are not for your organization. And there are things that happen that cause either that are causes of this, whether it be jealousy, whether it be a difference in what somebody, the small things are usually what I saw that broke a lot of teams up. And internal problems, not as much the external, but internal. And that came back to the structure of the organization, how strong that structure was.
The team won an astounding 11 superspeedway races in 1985, including the 3 Winston Million victories. However, on short tracks, those of less than a mile in length, he never once finished on the lead lap that season. That, as much as any kind of burnout from the Winston Million, doomed the Elliott's championship hopes in 1985.
The short tracks killed us.
Yeah.
The speedways weren't a problem. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it was easy to do any of this.
Right.
But and I'm not saying we had the speedways figured out, but that was where we had done all of our work, all of our focus. Everything was put into the races that we knew paid good money. All right, so came time for the short tracks, and I'm not going to say we failed, but we failed to plan for the short tracks and how bad that was going to eat into your points.
My name is Rick Houston, and I hope you've enjoyed this production from the Scene Vault. Give us a like and be sure to hit the subscribe button. Let us know your favorite Bill Elliott memory in the comments section below.